What's up guys, it's Commander Lee here doing a video of my Warhammer 40k chapter. Now, if you don't know what Warhammer 40k is, I suggest you might think of looking it up. Um, if you do know what Warhammer 40k is, then you'll follow most of what is happening. And I'll probably mention a few things that you probably never knew before. I don't know if I will or not, but we'll see. The other thing is, this is my first time doing anything like this where I have a screen, I talk over a mic, and so if there's anything wrong, sorry about the video. If there's anything wrong with the video, I'm sorry. Like I said, this is my first time doing anything like this. So I guess I'll go and get started on my Warhammer 40k chapter. I'm gonna be bringing this pictures up so that you don't get completely bored of just staring at one screen of a picture, and sometimes you will be staring at one screen of a picture. So sorry about that, because I will get carried away of talking. Alright, let's get into it. My Warhammer 40k chapter comes from the planet Asciliath. I'll probably say Asciliath differently sometimes, but besides that, my planet's name is Asciliath. Asciliath is a mostly flat land. Has mostly flatlands. There are a few forests here and there, few mountains also here and there, but it is pretty flat. The environment is similar to Earth, Terra. But the planet is much more smaller than Earth. Not extremely too small, but pretty small compared to Earth. So that is pretty much what Terra is. And since um, Terra is such good flatlands, the earth, the people settled here have made great many crops around their cities, either wheat or corn or whatever, but there is great many crops around the cities most of the time, so it gives this beautiful glowing golden look to it, especially in the evening. um so I will go through the story of how my chapter came to be. Of course, first off, the first settlers came to the Asciliath as a colony, to colonize the planet, and they were surprised, of course, of how beautiful and majestic the land was, compared to their old home Earth. And they soon enough colonized it and began to grow. But then the war against the Men of Iron. The Men of Iron are pretty much AIs, robots that have been corrupted by the forces of chaos. And so, the war happened. But on this planet, it was not such a big war as great many other planets. On this planet, it was a little less stressed. I mean, a little less of a war more than skirmishes and battles. The leader, the commander of the colony was named Protonus. He was the like I said, commander of this planet. Commander of the colony. He was a great wise commander. He was high of his he was in the top ranks of his military officer training. He was a he yes, he was high as officer training. And when he became a commander, he mostly knew almost everybody in the colony, and so he was the commander. And when the War of the Men of Iron happened, he led, of course, his people, the colony, against the Men of Iron. Now, one thing to note is that this colony did not use as many AI or machines as other colonies have. Protonus believed that using your bare hands was the best way to get stuff done, but does not mean that he did not use machines or AIs in the colony. So when the AIs and machines turned against him, the machines were less stronger than other colonies. So the so the Protonus was able to lead his people and annihilate the Men of Iron. Afterwards, Protonus used the machines even after the battles that he had fought, struggling with his people, and the colony still stood strong even after such losses during the small battles that happened. But the Men of Iron were extinguished from this planet, and Protonus reorganized order. And also, not that add on to the battles that Protonus had with the Men of Iron, the warp was down, and so he could not connect with any other colonies or any other planets of the great once great human empire. So Protonus was left with working out every situation by himself on the planet as the commander and pretty much the commander of the colony. And as time went on, as they finally were able to grow and become stronger, there were only a handful of militia in the colony because it was small. Even after the battle, the people went back to their nowadays jobs in the colony, but in the small police force went back to their police force. So there's only a hand of them, a hand of those, however, in the colony serving. So Protonus realized that when the battle happened, after the battles were done, after the War of the Men of Iron, Protonus realized that he needed to grow his militia. Make a militia out of the colony. So he tried his best to do so, but before he could get very far, orcs attacked. The greenskins attacked the planet. Now, this greenskin force was not a army or a clan. It was a small skirmish. It was pretty much like a rabble of orcs who came to plunder the planet. But they still outnumbered Protonus' colony greatly. But by the time the orcs came, the colony had lived there for some time and knew the layout of the land and had small fortifications. So when the orcs attacked, Protonus was able to protect the colony, the small little city that he had, and use the layout of the land especially to his advantage. Sometimes there will be a group of orcs that would disappear randomly, and because of the layout of the land. And so he was able to defend against the orcs and soon enough extinguish them from the planet so much that they had to the greenskins retreated from the planet to another place in the solar system. Protonus soon enough continued to grow his militia in defense and having a little space station even in the atmosphere to protect them from any other enemies. But by the time the space station was in space, Protonus had died and his descendants, Protonus II, had taken over. And soon enough, these colonies soon enough grew into a city because of such rich materials here and the leadership of Protonus. Protonus II was just as great as his father, and even Protonus III was even greater than his grandfather. Protonus II soon enough passed away, and his son Protonus III took over. Protonus III, of course, they continued to grow, soon enough having ships expand to the galaxy and scouting, but continued to grow their militia more and more over time. But then the Great Crusade came in contact with the planet Asclepius. Protonus and the Emperor met each other. The Emperor was surprised to see how flourishing this small colony grew into a great city. Not great city, but pretty vast city that was flourishing with people, and their militia was strong enough to repel a small clan of orcs, but not enough to go face to face with a full clan. But the Emperor was still so still surprised, see how far this colony had grown, and see how less of um, how less the men of iron had affected them, and they still used machines that were long aged and not used. The colonies still the cities still used them, and the emperor was surprised to see this. The emperor once rewarded the soon enough as Asclepius rejoined and became part of the Imperium, but the emperor also made as Protonus the third the commander of the city, but the emperor did not let Protonus become the full controller of the city. The emperor posted another higher ranking person over Protonus, but Protonus still held a high rank on the city. Soon enough, the emperor wanted to reward more to Protonus, even so much he wanted to reward Protonus a chapter. But one thing is, the only people at this time that were rewarded a Space Marine chapter were his sons, his Primarch sons. So the emperor and also the Primarch sons were Space Marines, meaning pretty much cybernetically enhanced to be Space Marines. So the emperor did not give Protonus his own chapter, but saw that his wife was soon to bear a child. So the emperor said that if Protonus' son would become a full-fledged Space Marine, the emperor would give his son a chapter. Now, the emperor also knew that becoming a Space Marine was hard and difficult, and it was a slight chance his son would even becoming a scout. So, past becoming even cybernetically enhanced. So the emperor, knowing that the Protonus' descendants would not even pass the cybernetically enhancement, left the planet and left Protonus there. Protonus knew that the Space Marines were strong and mighty, one of the mightiest of the warriors. So Protonus decided to let his son become a Space Marine, because he knew that having your own chapter was a great privilege, especially protecting his beautiful planet that Protonus the Third had. Protonus had his child, and he named him Protonus the Fourth. But when he became a Space Marine, his name was changed to something else. But Protonus the Third grew into a young boy, and by the time he became a young boy, Protonus III repeated to his son the countless duties that Protonus IV had to his home and the colony, repeating that he needed to achieve the goal of becoming a Space Marine so he could protect Asclepius, his beautiful home that Protonus IV never forgot. The great, beautiful land that pretty much was gold because of all the beautiful wheat and the mountains that were in the distance, and his city that flourished, and his home that flourished. So soon enough, Protonus IV was sent away to become a Space Marine. He had survived the cybernetically enhanced and even became a scout, but served in the Great Crusade. In serving in the Great Crusade, he endured great tragedies of fallen brothers that he grew close to, but and suffered on many countless battlefields under the Ultramarines, fighting and continued to be scarred by the horrors that he saw. But he never forgot his promise to his father by returning to Asclepius, his beautiful home, and having protectors with him to protect the planet from all evil. By the time he became a full Space Marine, the Emperor had forgotten that he even made this promise. The Space Marine, Protonus, however, did not forget the promise that the Emperor had. So Protonus even barged through the doors to the Emperor's chamber and demanded that he become a chapter master. Now Protonus had waited for some time, but he had waited far too long that he recognized that the emperor had even forgotten about Protonus. So by doing this, Protonus was angered that the emperor had forgotten this promise, but he also understood why the emperor forgotten, for the emperor was in control of an entire empire, and he was also leading crusade. Soon enough, Protonus was almost close enough to being executed, but the emperor remembered his promise to Protonus III, and so the emperor gave the Protonus his right to becoming a chapter master. So by doing this, Protonus was given the Knights of the Blade chapter, and Protonus soon enough returned back home. But the surprising thing was, his home was not what he once left it. His home was barren. There was no golden fields that were anymore. Great smoke came from the cities, and they were completely changed, with great fortifications on the outskirts of the planet. And Protonus, of course, was upset of this because he swore that he would protect the planet, but when he returned, it was pretty much barren. He found out that the reason why it was so barren is because of how many resources there were on the planet. The planet was as beautiful as Earth, but that did not matter to the Imperium. The Imperium needed the resources of Asclepius, and so they stripped it as much resources as they could. And so Protonus was enraged by this because, like I said, he remembered beautiful golden wheat fields, but now there was no more, and it was all barren land. So he landed on the planet with his new formed chapter, Knights of the Blade, and the Lord of the Hive was Lord of the Hive. She would not give Protonus the colony, even after Protonus claimed that this was his home planet and he had his own chapter and had the word of the emperor. But the Lord, she would not give it up. Instead, Protonus had to duel the Lord, and so they dueled. Even with Protonus's cybernetically enhanced body and strength of a space marine, he found that it was difficult to face her. She was a worthy opponent, and her skill with her blade was surprising. But Protonus, like I said, he is a cybernetically enhanced. He is a space marine, so soon enough he was able to knock her down and claim the right of lordship over the planet. She did forfeit after Protonus was able to knock her down. I guess her name would be the Lord would be Lord Elizabeth. To note on that, I don't really know the Lord's name. I'm just saying her name's Elizabeth. So that's what I'm saying. So, sorry. So Elizabeth forfeited the right to the lordship over the planet to Protonus. Protonus immediately began to reproduce the planet to its rightful beauty as it once had. But the Great Crusade demanded a lot of Protonus, since he was the new lord of the planet, and he felt the burden of his father. Now, one thing to note is that the Protonus had been away from the planet for hundreds of years. One thing about space marines is that they can live almost as long as elves can. The space marine can live for extremely long time until they are killed, or until they get old enough that they can't serve anymore. But pretty much, space marines live for a long time. That's the reason why they can travel to one planet to another. But those planets may be separated by hundreds of years. But by the time a space marine lands on the other planet, they are still as young as when they left it. So Protonus had served the Great Crusade for a long time, and he had left the planet for a long time. So that's the reason why the land was pretty much barren by the time he returned, and the city had ultimately changed greatly, so much that he could have not recognized his own people. He found out that Elizabeth was actually his father's descendants. He found out that Protonus III, of course, had more children, and Elizabeth was one of them. So, but Protonus found a connection of Elizabeth, and enough married Elizabeth as his wife. Now that is never heard, of course, of a space marine marrying anyone, but that is far in the future, where I sort of skipped several centuries, but that is far in the future, where by the time he gets married, that is far in the future. So Protonus finally reorganized. Finally, the land has started to grow. He immediately started to point his attention by the time he landed and claimed lordship. He immediately started pointing attention to the city. He wished it back to where it once was, flourishing, beautiful, but instead it was old and not. Instead, it was a hive, and people were and the people on the hive were not as he once left it. So he immediately started reorganizing, destroying buildings constantly, rebuilding them into a better, more beautiful building, but constantly changing, destroying most of the chimneys that did put toxins in the air, making the clouds come over the planet. But in the meantime, the Great Crusade continued onward, and he was having a hard time even putting resources to rebuilding his city, but also giving resources to the Great Crusade. By the time he was able finally make his space marines, finally do a training program for his space marines. The wheat fields have returned. His city was mostly beautiful as it once was. The clouds were disappearing. The storms over the city were disappearing. But then the civil war of the emperor happened. The Horus heresy happened. So soon enough, Protonus had to launch his fleet in the aid of the Imperium. But he left the planet in good hands by his right hand commander. He left the planet in his charge, and the commander was one of his best friends during the time in Crusades that was with Protonus throughout time. And so the commander Protonus even knighted his best friend lordship over the planet. And Protonus and him shared the same feelings of the planet and how beautiful it should be. So Protonus left that in his hands and left the planet to aid the Imperium. By the time Protonus rejoined with the Imperial armies, they had fell all the way back to Terra, almost so and Protonus was almost so late that he even was almost close enough not able to get through the blockade of the traitors. But he used to have reached Terra, and there he launched his forces to protect the cities. Now, while most of the Space Marines were protecting the Emperor and the capsule, Protonus was in the outskirts, protecting the small cities that had no defenses or had few defenses and not very many Space Marines to defend them because they were all concentrated in the capsule. There, Protonus put all of his forces and defended there. When the traitors came upon the planet, it was a massive horde of traitors that came on the planet, and also demon-like chaos monsters. So even if most of the forces were concentrated on the capital of the Imperium, Protonus was still overwhelmed by enemy forces. There Protonus proved and recognized. There Protonus proved himself worthy of one of the masters of the blade. There his legion was no longer named Knights of the Blade for show. They were known as Knights of the Blade because they were truly masters of the blade. There they proved themselves on the battlefield, constantly, time and time again, slaughtering the traitors on the planet. But soon enough, there were faulties, and the enemies did break through and destroy at least one of the cities under Protonus's defense. By the time all was said and done, the emperor was struck down Horus, and Horus was now defeated. But the emperor was, of course, put in his chamber. But Protonus finally had victory over the enemy, and was actually even before the capital, before the emperor had struck down Horus, Protonus had slew all of the enemies in his area, but with great casualties, and he was launching an offensive against the traitors on the capital. But by then, of course, like I said, Horus was finally slain, and the traitors retreated back to the Chaos Realm. And so Protonus finally, after long years of bloody war, Protonus finally retreated back to his home, where his wife had several children, and the Lord had actually surprisingly gained and trained more soldiers, more space marines in protection. And Protonus found out that the planet had been sieged several times by enemy forces, but the Lord had destroyed them all with aid of other high-ranking officers. Protonus's friend actually named them lords. His friend probably knighted about 5 other lords to aid him in combat against the sieges constantly being against him. Protonus had one child named Protonus the Fifth. Protonus the Fifth, soon a few years would become Protonus the Fifth and his other sons became space marines and served under the High Lord. And Elizabeth had passed away. And of course, that crushed Protonus's heart for finding out that his wife had passed away, and he because he had been gone for several years since a war of heresy, the Horus Heresy War. So Protonus finally returned back home, and finding that the planet was flourishing and prosperous. But soon the Protonus found, with his great many battles that he had won and learning and everything, he found that there was a voice calling out to him that he had heard in the past when he was on Asclepius, but never took notice of it. But now he felt a stronger voice calling out to him. He himself went to a great mountain, and inside the mountain he found a blade and some material that he had never seen before. The voice called out to him, saying that the plant was alive, and the plant gave Protonus, the protector of Asclepius, a special blade and a material that was very powerful and shining bright as the sun. The plant said that the plant was alive, and Protonus was sworn protector of the plant, and the plant chose Protonus to be a king over all the people. Even though he was a chapter master and he actually technically had authority over the plant even named him king. Now that's a little strange, but so Protonus actually found out that the plant was actually technically alive, and it was an extremely old race that had long been forgotten, so much that they are now extinct pretty much. The plant, and the reason why you never hear of such a ginormous monster is, ginormous creature that is alive, that is large as a plant, and has created pretty much a plant form, is because during the War of Heavens, these creatures were pretty much like said, were annihilated, and pretty much this Skilliath was one of a kind that you would never see on in any galaxy almost. Maybe there are a few points where they do come the other planets do come to react to the planet. Come with contact with other creatures that are largest planets, but Skilliath was one of a kind pretty much. So Protonus took the blade and the material. The material was called Protonus called the material Melton Power Stone. This melton type of power stone was pretty much like lava form, but gold. It did not harden whatsoever. But if you put iron or steel in, dipped it into the material, and when you pulled it out, it would have that stuff stuck onto the iron or steel like it was a magnet. But and also they found that the material, like I said, was pretty much shined like the sun, so it showed a great power coming from it. And if it struck an enemy, it would be as hot as lava. So, but the interesting thing is that they could not find a way to forge the material into any any blade, but were able to dip their blades into the material and bring it out. Like I said, it would magnetize the material, pretty much magnetize to the steel or iron, and it pretty much covered the blade. But over time, after striking and fighting constantly with the blade soon enough would dull, and the material would disappear from all the fighting. So, like I said, the Protonus and the colony, the chapter were never able to find out how to forge this material into any actual blade. But Protonus's blade was actually made purely of this material. This material came from Asclepius herself, planet Asclepius. So this blade shone even as bright as the sun, and was powerful, and would never dull, nor would it ever lose its power because of the material it was made of. So this was a great artifact that Protonus wielded, and it is a sacred artifact of the Knights of the Blade. The Knights of the Blade would cherish this material so much that the Imperium does not even know or record this material ever existing, because Asclepius told Protonus that if this material ever got out to the enemy or ever got out to the Imperium, bad things would actually happen. Either they would come to claim this material for themselves, or the enemy would come and annihilate the planet. The Asclepius herself. So Protonus, but does not mean Protonus did not use the material for their defenses or weapons, but they never ever released the true story or anything of the material. So Protonus soon enough regained his soul, returned home, but as time went on, he found that serving with other space marines in other chapters, and finding that most of the other and his his fellow brothers that were serving under him when he became his own chapter, he found that they regarded as humans. They regarded space marines as no more than as better and more stronger than humans, and thought as humans as weak and puny. Even though space marines, their heritage is of a normal human. So Protonus thought of this as an insult to humanity. And so when he created the training form for becoming a normal space marine, he completely changed it all. Even the Codex Astartes, he completely changed it all. Changed becoming a space marine completely. One of the training, after you become a space marine, you become a scout, and then after you prove yourself, you become a space marine, a full-fledged space marine. But Protonus changed this where you actually skip becoming a scout, and then after you become a full-fledged space marine. After all the hard trials and everything you have to go through, you become a full-fledged space marine. Reason why he did this is because when he needed more space marines, he did not have time to have a whole bunch of scouts constantly being trained and then becoming space marines. Protonus did not have this time, and also he believed that it was more better for a space marine to skip this training and go to a space marine. And one thing that he also implicated to counteract the weakness of the training of a scout, to counteract this, because becoming a scout took time and you would become an elite soldier by the time you went to becoming a space marine. Protonus implicated that becoming a normal space marine, you had to go through even more training even after becoming a space marine. And once you earned your knife, you would become an actual true space marine. Blades, knives, and swords were precious to the Knights of the Blade. That's the reason why they called the Knights of the Blade. It's because they take great honor of having just a knife. A knife proved that they were true warriors of Skiliath and true protectors. So, even after you become a full-fledged space marine, you must go through rigorous training, and by the time a space marine gains their blade, they are elite soldiers. Now, does not mean that there were not does not mean that they were not scout troops that Skiliath had. He actually had one legion, which is one. Give me 1 second. I gotta look at this real quick. Which is, legions were pretty much companies to the companies. Am I saying that right? Whatever. Where legions were pretty much armies and fleets that the Knights of the Blade had. So there's one legion that was dedicated in training space marine scouts. And when you are a scout, you pretty much are an elite scout, and they are trained to track in all the things that a scout does, especially going on behind enemy lines. And if we are speaking of the training of a space marine, even though the Knights of the Blade have no gene seed flaws, they still have a big flaw that no other chapter has. It's not similar to any other chapter. But the thing is, it has nothing to do with a gene seed of a space marine. It has to actually do with the creation of a space marine. Protonus, like I said, when Protonus saw that the space marines saw themselves as better and did not see themselves as humans anymore, Protonus wanted to close this gap between his brothers and the Knights of the Blade. So he took out a great many engineered add-ons to becoming a space marine. The one things that did make a space marine, such as the poisonous bite. This modifies the salivary gland, produces acid poison. poisonous bite, so that they can bite and give and their bite produced acid. The or something like the second heart, the emperor, I mean the second heart that Space Marine had. Protonus took the second heart even out also. Um, in the multi-lung, where Space Marine can close off their normal lungs in favor of a bioengineered multi-lung that can breathe poisonous atmosphere or even water. So these are things that Protonus took out of becoming. Those are only two things that Protonus took. Three things that Protonus took out of becoming a Space Marine, because all that made a Space Marine less of human, and Protonus wanted to close that gap. Even with these things, the Knights of the Blade are reckoned for their skillfulness their training and skillfulness of a Space Marine. When we saw this, even with these giant engineered enhancements taken away, Protonus had all of his Space Marines go through rigorous training, especially in close quarters combat. Then it is argued that the Knights of the Blade are one of the best of the Imperium in close quarters combat, but it cannot be argued that they are skillful with a blade. And so Protonus had his chapter go through rigorous training constantly of becoming better, and so that he believed, and the entire chapter believes that even without these enhancements they can achieve greatness, even without the enhancements. So either be trying to mindset, skill, or strength. The Space Marines of Knights of the Blade believed those were all they needed, even without the enhancements. So that is also one thing that was Protonus completely sketched out of making his chapter, as he built his chapter. Soon enough, and also one thing is that Protonus and the Codex Astartes, there is a rule that you only should have 10 legions, 10 companies, or 10 armies in one chapter. But Protonus extended this to 15, just as the Grey Wolves, or I gotta make sure I'm saying their name right. Space Wolves. There we go. Just as Space Wolves did not do this, authority of the Codex Astartes of having, as the Space Wolves had great many more armies than Codex Astartes allowed, so did Knights of the Blade also do this. Knights of the Blade had 15 legions, had 15 armies. But thing is, the Imperium never caught on to this, is because Protonus had 5 dedicated in protecting Asclepius, and 10 were in the protecting solar system. One thing is the reason why you never hear of the chapter is because Protonus had his entire fleets protecting Asclepius galaxy, Asclepius's galaxy that surrounded Asclepius. The 10 fleets were dedicated protecting this galaxy. So, but the armies do not venture far very often. A few times they will rush to aid of an army of a planet, but besides that, they do not venture far beyond their galaxy. They are sworn to protect their galaxy to the end. To protect their galaxy. And one reason why there's 5 fleets protecting Asclepius is because they believe Asclepius is their all mother, their mother planet that they swore to protect at all costs. And even great more defenses are posted on Asclepius. Even the moon is fully fortified of Asclepius, so much that Asclepius can be counted as strong as Terra itself. Um, Let me think real quick. But what has kept in all this, the Imperium have seen the Knights of the Blade insulting great many of the Codex Astartes, great many things um that the Imperium call special, and um, that hold on to the Imperium religion. Asclepius almost throws those out the window. Even Asclepius almost throws out the Codex Astartes out the window almost. But the only thing that's keeping sorry, I'm stumbling here. The Imperium have found that Asclepius has been insulting and not following the Codex Astartes to the book. One such thing that is an insult is that Asclepius does not. The Knights of the Blade do not believe in the Emperor as a sovereign emperor as most chapters do. The Asclepius pretty much almost sometimes insults the Emperor around those who believe in the Emperor. And so the Imperium holds the Emperor dearly, and if anyone insults the Emperor, they will mostly perish. Asclepius, Knights of the Blade, is one of the few chapters that have survived, or few people in whole have survived insulting the Emperor. The several times the Imperium have thought of annihilating the Asclepius for their insults and treachery of insulting Codex Astartes and also insulting their sovereign emperor. But the only thing holding them back is because time and time again, Britonus and his legion in his chapter have proven themselves loyal to humanity. And time again, also the Imperium have always reminded to how knowledgeable Britonus is in his combat and years of war. And so the Imperium so the Imperium have left the chapter unscathed, but instead they have scratched them almost out of the history books of the Imperium. And so much that it's very extremely hard to find anything about the Knights of the Blade. And the Imperium have gone so as far as to even scratch the Emperor and the first Britonus, the first chapter Master Britonus meeting and talking about Britonus III having his own chapter. So much that the Imperium have scratched that out from history books. And so these are two reasons why you'll never even hear of the Knights of the Blade. Is one, they stay in their galaxy, and two, they have been scratched out of the Imperium history books. But all know and recognize, but there's one thing that all chapters know and recognize, is that the Knights of the Blade are masters of the blade in close quarters combat. That is also one thing that no chapter can deny. One thing also curious about the chapter is that there are few librarians and chaplains. Almost there are no chaplains, but very, very few librarians. Librarians are holders of the codex, librarians are holders of the codex, and so that's one reason why you never hear. That's the reason why you rarely hear a librarian in the Legion, is because because these Knights of the Blade do not follow the Codex Astartes. So you will hear. But one thing is, the Space Marines are constantly haunted by the chaos and stuff, and without a chaplain or a librarian to aid a Space Marine's hard lingering mind of chaos. Um, it is hard for the chapter, but each soldier is sworn if they have problems, if they have disagreements or hardships, they will go to their captain and ask him aid for such lingering minds. Captains are not chosen for being a captain for no reason. A captain is chosen because he is a because he's knowledgeable and loyal to the Knights of the Blade. And if the captain cannot answer the Space Marine's question, the captain will put the Space Marine ask the commander. The commander does not have, then he'll go up the ranks until it becomes Supertonus himself. And there the soldier will ask aid. Supertonus constantly have his soldiers come to him asking these questions, but Supertonus constantly has the answer to all of the questions every soldier has. And all of this, and also on all of this, the Supertonus realizing this happens frequently, Supertonus has also put in a training regimen where every Space Marine must go through some psychic training. In psychic training to overcome these obstacles that they are given. And so with counting the training that a Space Marine does, even after becoming a full-fledged Space Marine, they are not called a full-fledged Space Marine until they are gained their knife. And then in the rank of becoming going through the ranks of becoming a Space Marine, a knife is very important to a Space Marine. After even gaining their knife, they must go through more training to where they can even carve their first name into the knife. Once they have carved their first name into a knife, as time goes on, they go to next rank. They are able to dip their blades into the beautiful golden-like liquid. Once that has happened, they continue onward to where their knife is even forged into a blade. That is usually when they become a captain. Then the captain becomes a commander after his blade has his name forged. After his blade has his full name forged into it. After having his full blade forged into it, he then can have his as he proves himself worthy. The commander can dip his blade into the golden-like liquid. There, he has proven himself worthy of the title. Prove himself worthy of a true knight of Asclepius. I did go off board for a second about the story. I did go off board, and I want to mention one thing. I did mention Supertonus had several lords. Supertonus has 15 lords over 15 armies. And Supertonus has a round table of all those 15 warriors. Supertonus calls the round table Swords of Supertonus. The Swords of Supertonus, like I said, trying to say, are made up of Supertonus's lords. There they will meet most of the time. Most of the time, there's only 5 lords that are able to meet with Supertonus and talk about different things. But on special occasions, he is even able to gather all of his 15 lords and talk about certain things. Now, one thing to be interestingly noted about Supertonus himself is that Supertonus is actually the second chapter master. The Supertonus the first, of course, survived the Horse Heresy and returned home, but then there was a brutal battle against the Tyranids. And Supertonus sacrificed himself and defeated the Tyranids, but when he was Supertonus sacrificed himself, and when he was finally struck down and slain by a Tyranid warlord, Supertonus' blade was lost. The legendary blade that was given to him named Excalibur. I forgot to mention that the blade is named Excalibur. I didn't forget to mention that. I'm sorry about that, but his name is named, the legendary blade is named Excalibur. Excalibur was lost on the planet, and hearing this news from the chapter launched a full-scale invasion of the planet once more to reclaim this legendary weapon. It took, and great many casualties were taken by the Knights of the Blade trying to retake this planet, so much that almost an entire legion was wiped out. Finally, they regained the planet and searched for the blade, for this was their ultimate goal in regaining the planet. They finally regained the blade, but amidst of all this, Protonus was slain, and they had to bury their chapter master. But one of the lords, one of his best friends, said that the chapter may not know of their fallen chapter master, and that the Lord called upon the Protonus' son, Protonus the fifth, and Protonus the fifth raised up and became the new chapter. For certain reasons, the chapter never, and no other chapter even knows that the first Protonus had even died, and that they believe the Protonus the fifth is the normal, is the same Protonus that had led their Space Marines in Horus Heresy. This and also curious because Curiosity's Imperium, not hearing of any Protonus dying, is curious because the Protonus had lived over past a normal Space Marine's lifespan. And so this is a curious thing that the Imperium have never been able to figure out, but ignore because they have other great things to worry about. But Protonus the Fifth is as wise and as great as his father was, and continues to lead the Imperium leads the Knights of Blade in protection of the galaxy. In saying this, one thing about the genetic enhancement being taken away, one thing is that the Space Marines, this may surprise everybody, but Space Marines have families. They do have wives that they marry instead of have children. This is very rare. I mean, this is extremely rare amongst the Space Marines, especially war machines that are sworn to kill all enemies. This is unusual, very unusual, and the Codex Astartes most likely even prohibits this ever happening. But a great many Space Marines in the chapter have families that they have on Asciliath, and this also comes into why Asciliath stays in their own galaxy, because you probably already know, because because traveling galaxy takes about a very long time. But if you travel planet to planet in the same galaxy, you don't have to travel as far as it would to be traveling galaxy. So this makes it shorter for a Space Marine to return home to their loved ones, and there they will spend time together until the Space Marines recalled back to their legion and serve in space again. It is in one thing to keep the family safe from all enemies. The families are sworn to be left on the planet Asciliath, and there they will be protected and will almost likely never leave unless they are a Space Marine. Space Marines are ones that can go freely, but to keep the family safe, they will stay on the planet. Rarely will any civilian ever leave the planet. Um, and this also goes into psychic struggle with the Knights of the Blade, because the Chaos can use this to um, they can Chaos can use this to corrupt the Space Marine. That is the reason why the Space Marines go through countless struggles of ensuring that, their psychic strength and power over the psychic um, training. So, I believe this sums up my chapter. And then one more thing I want to mention is also with the whole thing about being more human. The Knights of Blade take great honor of just being a foot soldier, a space marine. On occasion, of course, the chapter does have war machines that they use, but most of the time they just use assault squads or command squads, or normal space marines. This way the Knights of the Blade can get in close quarters very easily and quickly, and do not have to worry about getting out of a vehicle or anything anything like that. They rely heavily on infantry forces. And when they are in close quarters combat, their light shines brightest, and they prove themselves. Like keep on saying, prove themselves being known for close quarter combat. They in their training, the knights are recognized to constantly spar each other with the blade, and sometimes even have championships who is the best warrior of the blade. And even in these darkest times, the Protona still is beautiful and flourishing than any other planet in the Imperium, more than as beautiful as Terra itself. Machines are limited, factories are limited, that so much that the Space Marines have to create on the moon a factory where they produce all their gear and weapons. There is one squad that is and in the Knights of the Blade mostly have this color scheme where it's yellow, brown, and silver. Silver to them proves that they are Knights of the Blade, and the other colors are symbolization of their home planet. But there are occasions where the knights do wear their home planet's colors as almost like camouflage. This is special platoons that are made up of the best of Space Marines. They are sent on many strike engagements, battles against the enemy, quick and fast, but also, if need be, greatly close quarters. This army these platoons specialize mostly in distant combat, but do also specialize in close quarters. But the normal Space Marine with the silver specializes in close quarter combat. There's one more force that I will mention. There is the Raider battalion, that is the Raider Legion, that is in the Knights of Blade's ranks. The Raider Legion is made up of other Space Marines from other chapters. There is only one chapter that most people know of as Death Wing, where other Space Marines come and make their own pretty much chapter like, but this legion is part of Knights of the Blade, but are made up of other Space Marines. Now, thing is that these are not official, are not are from other chapters, but they are pretty much renegades. They are pretty much like similar to Ronin, or they have been left for dead, or they have abandoned their chapter. Different things such as this. If the chapter even found out that one of these soldiers would be a traitor, the chapter would most likely, the enemy chapter would most likely hunt down the raiders and kill them. So the raiders keep their identity secret. Only Protonus and the lords truly know what the actual names of these raiders warriors are. Even Knights of Blade chapter knows little of the raiders, but the lords, and like I said, King Protonus knows very well what they are. King Protonus did make this chapter for certain reasons. One, Protonus needed a quick access to a force that was mighty and strong as about 2 legions, 2 of his armies that could get somewhere very quickly and fast and hold the planet hold the planet to the last man. So that's one reason why Protonus had created this legion, and the other is that he felt very sad and sorrowful for the Space Marines who have been left for dead or have been scarred from the battles and wars and have left their chapter, have ran away from their chapter. These 4 warriors are from certain chapters. I have named them. This warrior here is from this soldier here is a captain of the Raiders, and he is from the chapter the chapter Imperial Fists. He after his entire squad was left for dead on a planet surface, and he was the last only to survive. Protonus soon enough found the Imperial Fist soldier and gave him a home and planet, and even gave him, and seeing this warrior's rage and anger, Protonus gave him the rank of captain in the new formed Legion Raiders. Their Protonus, this Imperial Fist served the Knights of the Blade, ruthlessly killing his foes. And then to our left we have this soldier here. This soldier is from the Crimson Fist chapter. This soldier has served on great many battlefields and is known for having exaggeration of having too many weapons on him, as you can see. But he is nevertheless very a great shot in his combat, and he has a stubbornness of a bull. Such does the Imperial Fist captain. Both of them share the same stubbornness, but the soldier here is even twice as stubborn as he is. To our right, we have this soldier. He comes from the Iron Hands. He was almost severely punished for his love for alien technology. Soon enough, he was finally able to escape the Iron Fists from their cruel treatment and punishment upon the soldier, that he ran away and King Protonus found this soldier in the midst of the hive and asked him to join the Raider squad. There he was given a great many alien technologies, where most of the time he uses the alien technologies in his armory that he personally uses. Then we have the last one. We have the back one. This soldier wields 2 chainsaws, and he is ruthless as any other raider soldier, raider in the Raider Legion. He is from the Flesh Terrors, and he when Protonus found him, he was overcome by the blood rage. So now Protonus knocked this soldier out in combat, and he returned him back to Ascleith. There, the Ascleith scientists found a way to cure the blood rage for some time, but the soldier was so wounded that had great burns on his face that the science engineers had to give him a had to give him a mechanical face. This also was extremely painful and going to rage of the soldier. But the red, when every time the red rage ever came again overcome the soldier would rarely even harm his fellow brothers. And reason why this has happened is reason why he has never harmed any of his fellow brothers is because they share the brotherhood bond. They have the squad has constantly, the Legion itself has constantly gone through peril, training with each other, and have gained this brotherhood that no other chapter has. They trust each other with their lives, even trusting their lives to the Flesh Terrors. And so that sums up the Raider force. The Raiders are known to have immense of armories that they carry, so much that they pretty much are a walking armory themselves, and are recognized to hold the line as best as possible, and are stubborn as Imperial fists are. They are, like I said at the beginning, they are called upon Protonus to go to one planet if the Legion cannot get there quick enough. A full-scale Master Legion is not quick enough to get to a planet in need. The Raiders are called upon to go to that planet and hold it out. I'm pretty sure that sums up my Raider Legion. That is the elite of the best in the Imperial, in the Knights of the Blade. Knights of the Blade are defile the Imperium a great many times, but the Imperium cannot fully wipe them out. So I don't know why I repeated that, but I think that was a good step for my chapter and explaining what my chapter is, how they came to be, and what they have to go through and all of that. So guys, I'm sorry that it took about an hour, even longer, for me to make this video, but I hope you enjoyed watching me and ramble on about my cool chapter that I have made. There are a few things probably you're wondering, like this doesn't make any sense. If you want to know more, if you're very curious about it, I suggest you comment on my video, but if you're not, that's cool with me. But I hope you enjoy this video. Thanks for watching, and I will catch y'all there. Thanks for watching, guys.